My name is Omar. I am 78. I live in a house that creaks more than I do, on the outskirts of a small town where the air seems to stand still forever, frozen, like the memories of who I once was. Once. I don't like that word. It contains the shadow of what has been lost, burned, erased. My home is not a refuge, but a witness to my fading. The children only come for holidays, glancing at the clock before I have time to ask how things are. Everything is perfect for them, but for me, there is always no time. My granddaughter Lyra only drops her phone when she asks for the Wi-Fi password. My beloved grandson Vlad once hugged me with all the strength of his little hands. Now he looks through me, like through a car window. He saw it, but forgot in a second. The store on the corner, I once financed the repair of its roof. Today, the cashier doesn't even look up when I say hello. At the clinic, the doctor speaks to me without looking. As if I'm not a person, but just another item on the list: examination. Blood pressure. Prescribe pills. I want to stand up and scream, I was someone. But who will hear me? Every day I wake up to a silence that is louder than any scream. I make myself porridge. I eat it slowly, staring at the walls. When I'm done, I wash the plate and put it in the dryer, like a soldier puts down his weapon after a battle. I go to the post office. I don't wait for letters, just to feel the door open. But the worst thing is not the silence. The worst thing is indifference. It's like mold, it first appears in a corner of the soul, and then spreads, absorbing everything. At first, I justified everyone: children are busy, young people are different, society is changing. But something inside me has begun to rot. I feel it. I am no longer just a grandfather, I am a cavity that once held pride. That night I lay awake for a long time. I looked at the ceiling, where shadows danced in the light of the lantern. And suddenly I realized, I am invisible. Not figuratively. Literally. I am not seen. I am not heard. I am an empty sound in a crowded room. And with each passing day, something inside me shrinks. Dark, dense. It is still silent. But I know it is there. There are things that are not erased from memory. I still remember the smell of grease in my first garage, when I was still repairing generators and batteries by hand, and writing down orders in a notebook with soot-covered pages. I was no one's genius son, had no inheritance, had no connections. Only hands, hard as concrete, and a word that I fought for. My business began with one light bulb, which I learned to repair, because it was dark in the village at night. Then, electrical wiring. Then, an electrical store. And then, a whole network. I was an authority. As Omar said, "So it will be," was heard in the meeting room. I sat in negotiations with people who today would not even say hello. I built, gave jobs, signed contracts. I was needed. My voice had weight. I did not hide behind bills. I educated. My children, Artem and Maria, were everything to me. I didn't miss a single illness, a single lesson. When Maria broke her arm, I sat next to her in the hospital day and night. When Artem failed the entrance exam, I didn't scream, I said, "Let's start from the other side." The world is not a door, but a labyrinth. My wife, Alla, always said, "Omar, you are a rock." And I was. Until her last day. I held her hand when she said goodbye to life. I didn't let myself cry. Because rocks don't cry. And now? Now my grandson throws the phrase, "What do you understand by this, grandfather?" And I remain silent. Artem sends me $20 for medicine, with the signature, "Take care of yourself," like a benefactor from a foreign country. And Maria? She doesn't call. Maybe she thinks I don't remember her voice anymore. And I remember. I remember everything. I remember holding their hands. I remember covering my relatives' debts. I remember fighting for every day so that they would have light. Now the darkness is inside me. Thick, old, like peat. Sometimes I open my old safe. There are photographs there, my hand on Maria's shoulder on her wedding day, smiling Artem in his uniform after the army. I sit for an hour. I sit and remain silent. I have no friends. Those who were there are dead. Those who stayed have forgotten. I am like a ship that has drifted into the swamp. But I am still standing. Drowned, but not sunk. These memories are like rusty nails, they hurt when you touch them, but they cannot be thrown away. It all started with little things. They always start like that, with things that seem insignificant, but slowly wear you down like water on a stone. One evening I tried to call Artem, just to talk, because the room was too quiet. He didn't pick up the phone. I wrote later, "Father, sorry, a meeting. Is everything okay?" I wrote, "Yes, everything is okay." And turned off the phone. The next morning I went to the pharmacy. My heart ached at night, squeezed like a vice. In the queue in front of me, a young woman with a wheelchair. I stood, holding a list. My fingers trembled. When it was my turn, the pharmacist looked at me as if at an object. "You can't take all these drugs together," she said dryly. "And why do you need 2 heart medications? Aren't you getting confused in the doses?" The doctor told me. "Which doctor? Last name?" "I don't remember." "Then come when you know." She turned away. Next. I walked home slowly. Nothing in my hands. Emptiness in my chest. And in my head, they don't listen. They don't see. They don't believe. It was cold in the house, although the batteries were warm. I sat down and opened the old diary for the first time, in which I used to write down financial plans. And wrote down a new one, September 19th. Pharmacist. Rejection. Humiliation. That same day Vlad called me. Not to ask how I was. "Grandpa, can you sign the documents for the transfer of the land? Dad says you don't need it anymore." I was silent. "Hello. Are you here?" "I'm here, Vlad. I can hear everything." And hung up the phone. The entry in the diary, Vlad. Land. Inheritance. Greed. The following Sunday I asked Maria to take me to the hospital. "I have a full Sunday, Dad. Order a taxi." "I wanted to, I can't always be there, Dad. I work." There was fatigue in his eyes. There was icy indifference in his voice. I didn't hear rejection. I heard, "I don't need you." And then a moment happened that I will never forget. I dropped the grocery bags near the supermarket. I bent down. The milk rolled across the asphalt. 2 teenagers stood nearby. One of them laughed. "Hey, Grandpa, maybe you've had enough of living." The other added, "Instead of buying food, maybe you're booking a place in the cemetery." They left without waiting for a reaction. And I stood there, holding on to the handle of the torn bag. I fell to my knees. There were people all around. Someone looked. Most of them didn't. Something cracked in my chest. But it wasn't a bone. Something moved somewhere inside me, old, long forgotten. Something dark. Something I had kept closed for years. Anger. Pure, icy anger. I stood up, wiped my hands on my pants, picked up another package. And left. Straight. Straight. Without a word. At home I opened my diary and wrote, October 3rd. 2. Laughter. Fall. I was born. Another me. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with thick air that smelled of the ashes of burned memories. They didn't hear me. But now they will. I sat in the dark for a long time. Not the kind that happens in the evening, it comes and goes. And in the other, the kind that appears in the middle, when something inside you finally dies. And instead of pain, silence comes. Clear. Cold. Iron. I took out an old metal box from under the floor. I hadn't opened it for many years. Inside, no weapons. Something else. What is more valuable? Old contacts, business cards, codes, diagrams, copies of documents, printouts of correspondence from the times when I was still a player. When I managed not only business, but also people. Systems. Information. I have always been a strategist. The street teaches you to fight. Business, to win without a fight. I have never been a saint. But I have never been a punisher. Until today. I started small. I found an old acquaintance, Gina Krivy, a former SBU employee, now lives in Chernivtsi. He owes me. Now he is my eyes. From him, access to the databases. From the other, the password to the children's accounts. A little manipulation. Anonymous letters. Information. Everything according to the notes. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to make them see themselves. To see the rot that they didn't notice. I found out that Artem was having an affair with a colleague, and that colleague was already blackmailing him. I threw this information to Maria through a fake friend on a social network. The children are torn apart. I knew that Vlad had plans to enter an expensive university in the Netherlands, through fake recommendations. Now this university has received an anonymous letter. He was refused. He doesn't understand how. And I look at him through the camera screen in the square, where he is silently smoking. Finally, he thinks. I set everyone up, not directly, but with hints, sequential events, information at the right moment. No hacking. No threats. Only actions that start a chain. The word arouses suspicion. Delay sows doubt. Truth breaks the bond. I arranged for Maria to have a random check of her charity foundation's financial statements. Now she reports to the prosecutor's office. No one will arrest her, she's clean. But nerves? The eyes of society? Image? They started looking for the guilty. One in each other. And me? I sat in the kitchen, drinking black coffee. I wrote in my diary, October 12th. Artem is lonely. Maria is under pressure. Vlad is deceived. They are learning. I am learning. I didn't say that I would return love. But I would return respect. I became a shadow, not evil, not an enemy. I am a consequence. The consequence of their choices. And you know what's most interesting? They have already started calling cautiously. With a hint of doubt in their voice. With a cautious, "Dad, how are you feeling?" "Grandpa, we would like to come for the weekend." I nod. I don't say that I know why. Let them think for themselves. I weigh again. And my weight is not in money. But in silence, which can make you afraid. I did not harm anyone. They destroyed themselves. I only held up a mirror for them. I'm on the veranda again. Black tea. Autumn morning. The air is fresh, clean. Leaves are falling, as if apologizing. The house is silent. But now it is not empty. It is like a pause after a symphony. Everything has ended, as it should have been. Artem now calls every week. Not always with warmth, but with respect. His voice is no longer that solid confidence that borders on indifference. There was a pause in it before each answer. He began to weigh his words. He learned to think about others. It cost a lot, but that's the only way the strong learn. Maria came last Sunday. With a bouquet. Not flowers, but silence in her eyes. She sat in the kitchen, as she used to. She looked at him for a long time. She said, "Dad, you were always stronger than I thought." I wasn't. I became. She doesn't understand everything. And she doesn't have to. I don't want their repentance. I want them to know that there is no weakness in old age. There is experience. There is memory. There is skill. Vlad writes less often. But each of his messages now is like an alarm signal. He is afraid. And that is good. Someday respect will appear. Neighbors began to greet each other. Someone saw me calmly talking to the head of the city council on a bench. He used to work in my company. Someone heard that it was I who saved little Koshli from being drafted by calling where to go. Now they see me again. Not as a shadow, as a wall. I am no longer alone. I am alone. But not alone. I did not take revenge, I taught. It was not a war. It was a lesson. They forgot who I was. I reminded them. Without shouting. Without anger. Only with precision. One of the grandchildren recently asked, "Grandfather, will you ever forgive us?" I looked him in the eyes. I do not need to forgive you. I need you to remember. I no longer wait for calls. I no longer live by hope. I live, as a strategist. As someone who won, even when everyone thought they lost. The world doesn't have to be kind. But everyone has the right to respect. Even, and maybe especially, the old. This was my time. Not for revenge. But for justice. The last entry in the diary, the one everyone wrote off, is the one who writes the ending. The power of old age, in the silence that is not heard. But cannot be ignored. Thank you for walking this path with me. It was a deep, multi-layered story, with darkness, with pain, but also with the strength that is born when everything seems lost. Time no longer hurts. It simply goes. And I go with it, without hurrying. I no longer wait for the morning. And I am not afraid of the evening. My days are not bitter, they are deep. There is an undertone in each, like in good music. I once thought that old age was decay, decline, the end. Now I know, it is concentration. Purification. The maturation of a force that young people cannot understand, because it is silent. Once I was an example. Then, a shadow. Now, a mirror. I saw the true faces of my children, grandchildren, society. But they also saw mine for the first time. Not the wrinkled one. But what is inside. The one that has been silent for years, but has seen everything. Old age is not pity. Old age is the luxury of remembering. And an even greater luxury, not to forget yourself. I do not want to be praised. I do not seek applause. I just want everyone who lives next to an old person to stop for a moment and think, maybe I'm not a burden, but a legend. I'm not an angel. But I'm not a shadow either. I'm a reminder. Quiet, stern, incorruptible. Like winter, which sooner or later comes and forces everyone to bow their heads. I sit in silence, and I feel good. Not because everyone loves me. But because I'm no longer ignored. I've seen that indifference can be overcome. Not by shouting. But by presence. By strength of spirit. By steadfastness. Old age is power. But not for the weak. And if this story is ever read by someone who is as alone as I was, I want them to know, the last entry in the diary, I am not old. I am an experience that has survived. And if they don't hear me, I will make them see.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.